Hello, everybody. Welcome to Racing is Rubbing, his debut here on the 110 Nation Sports Radio Network. Tonight I have Steve Big Sweat Billmeyer with me to join me, and I'm your host, Mr. CJ Sports. Steve, how are you doing tonight?
Oh, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Oh, I can't complain at all. I had the opportunity. I didn't quite catch yesterday's race live, so I had an opportunity to sit here this afternoon and get to watch the race in Chicagoland. So I definitely got to see what all the hype was about yesterday on Facebook. I think that's been a very popular conversation on Facebook for the last 24 hours. So looking forward to jumping into that and put race one in the chase in the books, and look forward to see what race two is going to provide for us. Did you get an opportunity to catch that race and any of the other series races as well?
Yeah, I watched all three of them this weekend, and they were all pretty good shows, especially yesterday's race, the Cup race. It was kind of boring at times, but it had some excitement to it too, so it was a good show.
I definitely have to agree. A couple of the things that stuck out to me. One, the tire wear, and the fact that we're getting back to kind of old school when it comes to the tires. It seemed for the longest time that NASCAR and Goodyear brought tires to the track that didn't really wear, and it seemed to went from fuel window to fuel window, and it didn't leave a lot of room for strategy, or at least as much room for strategy. And then, of course, yesterday, as we seen the tire wear play a factor, and as soon as one of your front runners pit, everybody knew it was time to come. There was really no time to wait, because the time difference and the speed difference that you got, new tires versus old tires, would really put you behind the rest of the competition. Something more that we saw back in the day, and more in your day when it came to tire wear, is this, in your opinion, better for the sport? And are you glad to see that we're starting to see more of these races that tire wear has become a factor?
Yeah, definitely so. I think the past few years, Goodyear has concentrated on building the tire with a lot of grip and a lot of wearability, but they seem to have gotten away from that here recently, judging by how the tires have worn at some of the other tracks. So then again, that's something, worn tires put the race in the driver's hands more so. You get to the point where it's like you said, one driver pits and then all of them pit right behind him, and you kind of have to, because there's such a difference between war tires and new tires that you can pit early and then gain back up what you lost while the other ones are pitting. So I think we ought to applaud Goodyear for what they're doing. They're at least trying, among other things, to make the racing better.
Now, when you got to factor race in with tire wear, how much is that different strategy versus a race that you're kind of trying to go from window to, basically how different is it to strategize as a crew chief when you got to factor in tire wear versus these races that we've seen recently, up until recently, that it was from gas window to gas window?
Yeah, but Jeff Gordon's a prime example. He didn't pit at the end and stayed out on worn tires, and he fell from, I think, 2nd to 14th in a matter of a few laps. So you have to consider that. Hamlin only took two right side tires to get some track position and to situate himself near the front where he could get to the front. And other teams took four tires, counting on the increased grip and everything to give them enough speed to get to the front. It didn't quite work out. Hamlin got out front, and he just kind of left them all behind. So you have to consider, that factor when it gets down toward the end of the race as to what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And, I don't fault any of them really for the pit strategy they did. Each one thought that they were doing the right thing, and the drivers agreed with them. And for 2 of the 3, it didn't work out, but for Denny it did, so that worked out pretty good. The toughest thing I saw was they had the caution while Kurt Busch was leading. And at that time, when you're the leader, everybody behind you is going to do the opposite of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
He stayed out, everybody pitted, he got tires. If he'd have pitted, everybody would have stayed out, and he would have had a ton of cars to pass to get back to the lead. So that's where it really gets difficult, is down toward the end, and they have a caution, and you have to decide whether to pit or not to pit.
How inconvenient or maybe even aggravating is it when you, as a crew chief, you have mapped out in your mind how you want your pit stops to fall? In other words, in perfect conditions, in green flag pit stops, I know you guys have already pre-gamed. If this is the scenario, this is where we want to pit. This is where we feel comfortable with our tires. This is where we feel comfortable with our fuel mileage. And this is how we want to kind of our day roll, so everything kind of falls in place. Then you have someone 2 pit stalls down that decides, you know what, we're going to pit now. So we're going to pit 5 or 10 laps before everybody is planned, and now everybody's kind of follow the leader. As a crew chief, how aggravating does that get to be when your plans don't get to go as accordingly just because somebody else wants to kind of dictate how the how everybody is going to run their pit stops?
It gives you a headache if you're a crew chief trying to figure all this out and figure out what's going to happen and what to do. Crew chiefs will usually have a plan in mind as to they'll know how far they can go on fuel, and they have a pretty good idea of how the tires are going to wear. So they plan around that, but once the race starts, if you have a caution like 2 or 3 laps in, like they did yesterday with Denny Hamlin spinning out, if you're a crew chief, you figure that's the last caution you're going to get during the race. So all your strategy after that is all based on green flag pit stops. And the next caution you have, you figure that's the last caution you're going to have in the race, and you adjust your strategy by that. And it's, people talk about how tense and how intense it is for a driver, racing in the car all day and constantly concentrating and everything. Well, it's just as intense for the crew chief trying to keep up with what's going on, trying to keep up with what the other teams are doing, and trying to figure out how he's going to best handle pitting his car and getting his car up front and keeping it up front.
Going into this weekend, we knew that there was really, well, I'm going to say 2 teams. There's really 3 teams with Penske, but 2 teams that we really was going to put a lot of focus on. And one was Stewart-Haas Racing, more specifically Kevin Harvick, being your defending champion, and then the Joe Gibbs Racing team. And more so the Joe Gibbs Racing team, because what we've seen the last 2 months, about the last 8 to 10 races before we hit the chase, it seemed that either they won the race or they were in contention to win the race. And not only that, you consistently saw all 4 of those cars in the top 5 or top 10. It wasn't just one car here, one car there. It wasn't like the rest of the teams where, either you had Kurt Busch win, doing good one race and the rest of the team was kind of hurting, or Kevin Harvick up front, the rest of the team hurting, and so forth with the rest of the teams. You had all 4 cars up there and obviously put them in audience favorites to win the chase. And here we go entering and put a lot of, I'm not going to say fear, but it's obviously in the back of their mind as we heard Kevin Harvick come out in media today talking about, obviously there is some kind of intimidation or fear that Joe Gibbs Racing is going to dominate this because Kevin Harvick comes out. We're going to stomp them into the ground, trying to kind of, I don't know, trash talk, but I don't know, trying to make it seem that it's not as much on their mind as it probably really is. And here we go, week one, and we got all 4 cars in the top 9. And once again, we watched Joe Gibbs Racing be a very dominant factor. I mean, Denny Hamlin was almost 2 laps down at one point in this race. How now that the pressure is on, and now that we see him in week one, and now we see him, they got 3 races to outperform other teams. How much more impressed should we be with this Joe Gibbs Racing team now that we see under pressure how well this team is clicking together?
Well, JGR has been strong all year, especially on the 1.5 mile tracks, which are the majority of the chase races. The real saving grace for the other teams is New Hampshire being a flat track with tight turns is not quite the type of track that JGR runs good at. There's other teams that'll run better than those 4 cars at New Hampshire, so they think they've got a better chance now than they did before. And I would imagine somebody else would win this weekend besides Joe Gibbs Racing. There's teams like Stewart-Haas with Tony Stewart, Ganassi with Kyle Larson. The guys that have driven sprint cars have the best handle on how to get their cars through the corners without losing speed, and they're used to running those kind of tracks. So I think they have an advantage there, and it'll be interesting to see who ends up running up front. You mentioned Kevin Harvick talking about he was going to stomp JGR. That's kind of like following Darrell Waltrip's lead back when Darrell was racing in the 80s. He's trash talking. He's trying to get their mind off of what they're doing and on to what he's saying to kind of hinder them. You say something like that, and the teams go to the track, and the crew chief and the team is thinking 90% about what their car is doing and 10% of what Harvick's doing because of what he said, as opposed to Rodney Childers thinking 100% about his car. He's not having that diversion, and that gives you a little bit of an edge. And you keep getting that little bit of an edge any way you can until it becomes an edge that you can use against them.
Now, Joe Gibbs Racing wins once again. Denny Hamlin overcomes an injury. We're talking about a second Joe Gibbs Racing driver overcoming injuries to win races and be a dominant factor. We had John Nemechek win his first Truck Series race, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we've seen some performances out of other drivers, and everything wrapped up in this weekend. As interesting as it was, there's only really one thing that everybody's been talking about since the race ended, and that is the Kevin Harvick, Jimmy Johnson. It's even to the point that they're debating whether or not it was a punch or a shove, because it wasn't really a punch, but it was a closed fist. And then you got your conspiracy theories out there that believe that was just all staged because NASCAR wants the same kind of hype as they had as last year, and up to this point you didn't really have that going into the chase, or would have had at the end of the chase, even though there was legitimate contact. So we'll open this up with, if anybody was in the wrong, who was in the wrong when it came to that restart? And let's go with that first. Who was even in the wrong? Because you can honestly take that 3 different ways on who was wrong.
Yeah, you can point a finger at Joey Logano because Joey tap Jimmy Johnson in the rear and kind of put him down on the apron.
Mm-hmm.
But you can point the finger at Jimmy Johnson for trying to force his way back up off the apron, getting into Kevin Harvick. And you can point the finger at Kevin Harvick for not letting Jimmy get up. So, it kind of depends on who you like and who you need to blame for it. But if I was going to blame somebody, I'd blame Kevin Harvick for not letting him up. I can understand doing that toward the end of the race. You're not going to give anybody anything, but it wasn't near the end of the race, so he really didn't have anything to lose by letting Jimmy get back in line and everything. It wasn't going to affect his finishing position at the race, at the end of the race.
Yeah.
I would kind of think it was more Harvick's fault than anybody else.
I mean, obviously, if he would have done a little more give and take, he would have gone farther in the race at least. He wouldn't have had that tire go out. I was, when I first watched it, I wanted to blame Johnson. Then the more I thought about it, Harvick could have gave him that room. And then I want to be quick to point Logano because I'm not really a Logano fan, but how am I going to fault Logano for having a good restart and Jimmy Johnson not having, the guys in front of him not having that great of a restart, which caused him to kind of get Jimmy Johnson loose. So I can't fault the guy for having a phenomenal restart, which we're going to talk about restarts as well. But, it's one of those things that I think when you have a six-time champion and you got the defending champion and you talk about two drivers that normally drive smart and try to make sure that they're there at the end of the race, you would have thought that there would have been a lot more give and take in both of them. Yes, I lean more to agreeing with you. Harvick should have gave up that real estate. It wouldn't have cost him anything. He might have lost a position or two being in the middle. Who knows? But now looking at it, I bet you he wishes he would have, because instead of losing a position or two, you went down 50-something laps because you hit the wall and you had to rebuild the rear end of your car. It's one of those things that I think that if Kevin Harvick is not able to rebound in the next two races and get into victory lane, because I don't think even if finishing second the next two races, I was just listening to NASCAR Hub, even finishing second in the next two races, if those other guys have really good finishes and nobody finishes really outside of the top 20, which nobody in the chase outside of Kevin Harvick did in this race, there's not enough of a gap for him to make up. He's going to have to win. And I have this really, really strong feeling if Kevin Harvick does not become victorious in the next two races, he's probably going to make sure that Jimmy Johnson's run for a seventh championship is going to be really difficult.
Yeah, he made that comment last year. I think it was about Ryan Newman, that Newman did something to him, and he came back and said, if I can't win the championship, Newman isn't going to win it either. New Hampshire is a flat 1 mile track, so there's not a lot of speed in the corners.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good track to get a payback on, or you're not going to hurt the driver. He would figure he wouldn't crash hard enough to get hurt and everything, and if you wanted a payback, you would think that was a good track, even though Adam Petty and Kenny Irwin lost their life at that track. But their deal happened at the end of the straightaways where you built up speed, where if Harvick can hook him in the corner, he won't be going that fast. So, and Harvick is a very intense individual, and I think if he was, that would be a quick payback right there. If they'd had a couple of races before they got to New Hampshire, he might have cooled down and not think about it. But only having a week, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't rub on Jimmy some during that race, and but he's kind of put himself in the hole. He can't do much to Jimmy and take a chance on messing his car up and knocking himself out of contention for a win at New Hampshire. And then that only leaves one race that he has to win to stay in the chase. So, I don't know. I imagine it would be like a love tap he would give to Jimmy. You know, he might do it every time he gets around him. Like Kurt and Brad Keselowski did at Martinsville a couple of years ago. You know, every time they were on the track side by side, Brad would give him a shot. So it's going to be worth watching. Definitely so. And I'm going to be tuned in. I want to see what's going to happen just like everybody else. Nobody's really talked about New Hampshire, the media or anybody, previous to Sunday, and then all of a sudden, with what happened Sunday after the race, all the media's got attention to it, and there's going to be a lot of people that have decided to go to New Hampshire just to see what happens. So it was good for NASCAR, and it was good for the track owners too.
You know, I'm all about the fighting after. I like that NASCAR, especially last year, let the boys be boys. My only bicker about the post race activities is the fact that it's Kevin Harvick and Jimmy Johnson. I'm sorry, but Jimmy Johnson is just not that guy that if we're going to build a feud around and try to, and we know NASCAR is going to, as they did last year, once the fight started happening, that was part of their commercials. This is not the feud that I wanted. If I'm NASCAR, I'm wanting the Brad Keselowski, I'm wanting the Kyle Busch, the Kevin Harvick, the Matt Kenseth, the ones that we know get rowdy and everything else. That's to me, that's the only kind of deflation of this whole big possibility, a big bloom of what could happen this year with the ratings. Is this is not the two race car drivers we want to see be confrontational, because we just don't view Jimmy Johnson. I don't anyway. Don't view Jimmy Johnson as being that confrontational kind of race car driver.
No, I think everybody kind of views Jimmy like he's a lover, not a fighter. It's just not his style. I saw posts today on Facebook. Everybody's saying, well, Jimmy should have retaliated. Jimmy should have kicked his ass and everything. But from what I've read, Kevin Harvick, I don't know if it's a black belt or what belt he has, but he has a belt in Taekwondo. So there's really not anybody in the garage area that's going to kick his ass. That guy's tough. And in addition to that, they say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, except for Delana. Delana will kill you. And that's a tough woman, too. I wouldn't be surprised if away from the track, when they're in the motorhome or at home, Kevin's attitude is, yes, ma'am, of course, dear. You know, I think he's a little subservient to her, but she's pretty tough, and she came down there and said, you know, she was just trying to get Kevin calmed down and get him out of that situation and everything.
Oh, yeah, you definitely don't want to put yourself in any more of a hole. And, you know, if it would have gone too much farther, there's a possibility that NASCAR would have stepped in depending on how far it went, and could have possibly, you know, cost you points and money. And with you finishing as far back as you did in the chase or at Chicagoland because of that incident, you know, that you know, pretty much would guarantee you had to win. I think it's pretty much a lock that he has to win, but even not, you know, it will take a lot of scenarios to play out for him to make it without having to win. But, you know, being docked points is something he couldn't afford. I know that I was on social media earlier today and also saw a lot of comments about people labeling Kevin Harvick as a bully and bullying him around. And then, of course, you had a lot of the old school NASCAR fans out there talking about, you know, Basically, back in the day, that's, you kind of would have been laughed at if that's, the best that you came with. That, how much NASCAR has changed and really the view of the fans. You went from, first televised Daytona 500, that, they're going fist to fist out there on the track versus now, Kevin Harvick is labeled as a bully, even though Jimmy Johnson's the one that came to his motorhome, and what happened. Has does NASCAR and the viewership, the fan base, do we need to kind of be, I guess, schooled on the way that NASCAR used to be and the excitement that came from that, or is this newly taught, I guess, I don't know, newly viewed NASCAR that Kevin Harvick is bullying and they don't want to see the fights? Is that the best? I don't know. I like the old school NASCAR. Is basically what I'm getting at, and I want to see what to me put NASCAR on the map. And I know that this was a sport that was built for a long time, and this is not what put them on the map. But to me, what put NASCAR on the map was the Daytona 500. That first televised race, the action that they saw, and the fight in turn 3-4, and that to me kind of stamped NASCAR as the official place to be on Sunday afternoons. You got to catch this. Not only are they beating and banging the doors, they are beating and banging each other and everything else. A bunch of good old boys letting their tempers, express themselves out there on the track and in the garage area. And this new NASCAR that they police it, and there's I don't know. To me, it takes away from what the sport started off to be and what potentially grew this sport to be as big as it did. We went from a sport that constantly expanded the seating on and on and on to now you've seen a lot of tracks where they've taken back some of the seating and we're not even filling all the races. Does NASCAR need to look at or try to open up to the possibility of? We got a glimpse of it last year in the chase. I think it needs to open up it a little bit more. What are your thoughts, or do you feel that opens up too many issues?
Well, it's people say it harks back to the old school way of doing things, and it kind of does. But these drivers all have massive egos, and they all think they're the best driver out there every Sunday. So when something happens to deflate their ego, of course they're going to get mad about it and everything. Thinking Kevin Harvick's a bully works in Kevin Harvick's favor, because it might make Jimmy Johnson hesitate the next time when he's down on the apron about forcing his way back up and everything. He might be thinking, well, if I make Kevin mad this time, he's really going to kick my butt. So that kind of, there's a lot of head games going on, and it seems Kevin Harvick is about the top of it right now. He's pretty good at it. If you think back to last year's chase, number one, do you remember any of the other races other than the two where they were fighting, the people were fighting? And at Charlotte, Brad Keselowski and Jeff Gordon are standing there arguing and jawing with each other, and then you see Harvick sneak up behind Brad and push him toward Jeff, and he's doing that to try to start a fight between those two and hoping, maybe it'll get bad enough that NASCAR will suspend one or the other or both of them, and that's two less people he's got to beat in the chase. So the dude is pretty much on top of the game as far as head games go, and I think he's in Jimmy Johnson's head now and quite a few other drivers out there. And other than his finishing position Sunday, that's going to definitely help him, but he's dug himself a hole that he's got to get out of. So it'll be interesting to see how he handles the next two races before the first cutoff.
Now, speaking of getting in people's head, Jeff Gordon seemed to get into Kyle Busch's head a little bit, and I'm referring to the restarts. And I know that NASCAR, contemplated for a few laps on deciding whether or not Jeff Gordon jumped the restart, if Kyle Busch hung back on the restart. Obviously, Kyle Busch was not happy with the final outcomes. He felt that Jeff Gordon kind of jumped him on the restart. Jeff Burton, brought up an interesting point when they were talking about it, whether or not NASCAR, because he said, this was the first time he had seen, a replay of the restart and also get to see the speed. And he says he don't know if NASCAR, they use the same technology or not, but it was, it was the first time he got to see it, and he thought it was really cool. And the first time looking at the video, yeah, I agreed. It looked like, Kyle Busch never slowed down and Gordon had got a jump. But looking at it the second time and paying a little bit more attention to the white lines where the beginning of where you're supposed to start and then when you're finally supposed to start, it didn't look like Jeff Gordon really started to take off until he hit that line. And it looked like, Kyle Busch had just slowed it up a little bit or enough that, everybody was kind of, basically, I don't think Gordon could have slowed down anymore. I think that Kyle Busch was, legitimately right, but was trying to push an issue, causing a backup, causing a disruption. And I know it's all in the sport and everything, so I don't feel that either one was really faulted either way you want to look at it. And I'm fine with NASCAR not, taking the position back from Gordon or, saying anything to Kyle Busch. I think both of them were on a certain strategy. And it was a call that was really too close to me, it's like the NFL. If a call on the field is really close, instant replay will not overturn it unless there is absolute positive proof. You can't, if they can't determine something or it's too close to overturn it, they can't overturn it. And I feel that was kind of the same way when NASCAR went back and looked at that restart. Yeah, it could have went either way, and since the call went one way to start off, they couldn't really overturn it because it was too close to call. What did you think about that restart, and do you think that this is going to be something that NASCAR is going to really have to keep an eye on throughout this chase, that these contenders are going to push it the rest of this chase?
Well, speaking of head games, NASCAR kind of played a head game with that restart. They said they were going to review it, but they had no intention of reviewing it. They weren't going to penalize Jeff Gordon and take him out of the chase.
No.
If he's going to be out of the chase, it's going to be his doing, not NASCAR. Because if NASCAR had done that, especially with this being Jeff's last year, a ton of fans would be up in arms and everything about that. So I knew when they first said NASCAR was going to review it, I was sitting there thinking, no, they're not. They're just telling you that. The thing about restarts is there's a lot of head games that go on there and a lot of juking and jiving, but the spotter is more important on a restart than the driver is. The spotter stand is usually right at the start-finish line, and so the spotter can watch the cars on the front row. Kyle Busch and Jeff Gordon, their spotters are watching the front of their cars, and if they see that splitter rise up off the track, that means that car is accelerating, and they don't wait for the flag or the hear if the car is accelerating or anything. They see that splitter rise up and they holler go. And it's the same thing, which might have been what Kyle was doing. The drivers will sometimes let off the gas, and that makes the car beside him have to let off the gas to get back in line because he can't start before the leader does. And if your timing's good, you can let off the gas, then the other car lets off the gas. Well, his comes down and the spotter yells go, and you take off while the other guy's got his foot off the gas, and you jump out 2 or 3 seconds. And another thing they do is in their peripheral vision while they're watching the front of their car, they're watching the flag man too, because if you get too far out of the restart zone where the flagman starts the race, they're watching the flagman's right hand that's holding the flag and specifically watching his elbow. And if his elbow moves or his arm starts to straighten out or anything, that means he's getting ready to wave the flag, and they'll holler go to get him going. So if you pay attention, there's a lot of stuff going on just on a restart. And as far as NASCAR being able to police it, I don't see how they can. You know, you couldn't tell yesterday whether Gordon got on the gas first or if Kyle let off the gas trying to do something and Gordon took off. I mean, it's not a case of just Gordon jumping the restart. It could go either way, and NASCAR really doesn't have any way to police this now. It's pretty much just a judgment call.
I tell you what, I agree. I was sitting there thinking to myself, there's no way that they're going to penalize or do anything to Jeff Gordon, not in his farewell tour. They're going to not try to make this chase. I'm not going to say that they're going to make it easier for him or try to help him win it, but I don't think that by any stretch of the imagination they're going to try to make it any more difficult for him. As he did get to lead some laps, you know, that restart obviously projected him into first place. He ended up leading 41 laps of the race. But I just thought it was interesting. You know, to me, it was just one of those things that I never saw Kyle Busch's speed go down, but there's a possibility he let go of the gas and just happened to roll at the same speed. And it wasn't like Gordon's speed really accelerated. It was consistent, you know, move up 1 mile an hour, 1 mile an hour. It wasn't like it just all of a sudden shot up until you hit that line. So, you know, like I said, it was one of those things that even if NASCAR was going to really seriously look into it, I don't think that they could have went against it. If they would have, you know, first thing out of their mouth is he jumps it, and then they went back and replayed it, I don't think they would have reversed it the other way as well. It was just one of those things that it was really close. Looking at the replay on going either way, and it's really boiled down to whether or not you were a Kyle Busch fan or Jeff Gordon fan is how you saw that. Speaking of fans, and we'll talk a little bit more about the chase here in a second. But this gives me an opportunity to jump into another topic real quick. And we know that NASCAR is Junior Nation, and it's been about the Earnhardts forever and a day. And now we're going to get an opportunity to see another Earnhardt, as he ran a week or two ago. I think he ran Richmond. And speaking of Jeffrey, now has a contract, and we're going to see him in the 32 GFR racing machine for multiple races. How big is this for this sport? And I understand he's going to a team that's, you know, underfunded, and as sad as it is, we're not expecting a lot. Just because of the team he's going on. But in a sport that has kind of lived off the Earnhardt name, going from senior to junior, and without any gap with the overlap and even with the death, and we're getting to the point that we know Earnhardt Jr. is not necessarily looking at retirement, but we know that it's in the back of his mind. He already knows kind of what number he is looking at to call it quits and, you know, be more focused on junior motorsports versus, you know, his racing career. So how big is it for a sport that has, you know, kind of lived off that name for so long to have Jeffrey kind of enter the scene as we start to see almost like the same overlap as we're starting to see Junior make his way out of the scene?
Jeffrey hasn't shown a great deal, I'll say it, of talent in his three races. But, like you said, he is an Earnhardt. And so I'm sure that team is weighing the fact, you know, they're thinking how much can he tear up? How much is it going to cost us to run him versus how much can he bring in?
Yes.
I wouldn't be surprised if he brought another sponsor in just because somebody wants to be associated with that Earnhardt name. Um, the thing that'll tell the tale really is Bobby Labonte running the super speedway races. That's going to kind of tell you what kind of team he's got and what kind of motor program they've got and everything, because Bobby's a past champion and a well-experienced driver. So I think Jeffrey Earnhardt getting in a car is good for the sport. I hope he does good, and it's going to take some time. Some people are going to expect him to be in victory lane the first couple of races, and I don't see that happening. He's going to have to get experience in these in-cup cars and get it figured out, and then go vie for the win and everything. But I'm glad to see he's got a ride. I'm glad there's another Earnhardt coming up in the sport and everything. So it's a win-win really for the team and for him. So I think it's going to be a positive for sure.
It's a multi-year deal. Ford Fusion and Can-Am will be on board to serve as primary sponsor for 11 events and an associate level partner for other events in 2016. Well, when it comes to these drivers, and we've seen some drivers, they try to jump on whatever opportunities. I mean, ultimately, and you've heard me say this before, you're going from hundreds of thousands of talented drivers that drive on Friday and Saturday nights, all the way up to ultimately the goal is to be one of those 43 drivers. And what makes this sport even more unique is the fact that inside those 43 spots, you got about 20 or 25 at least that are not going anywhere, not until they retire. Your Jimmy Johnsons, your Gordons, your Danikas, your Tony Stewarts, they are not going nowhere. So ultimately, you got somewhere between 15 and 18 spots, maybe at most, maybe 20, that you are one of hundreds of thousands of young, talented drivers trying to ultimately get. And so when you get an opportunity such what Jeffrey Earnhardt's getting, it's hard to resist taking a leap in faith that this team is going to give you a product that you can perform and really showcase your talent for a better opportunity. My question to you is, when you see this, is it better for a driver that is wanting to ultimately be on a championship-winning team? Is it good for them to take advantage of any seat ride, regardless how this may turn out and make him look as a driver? Or is it better to stay in the lower levels and continue to build your resume, ultimately looking for a spot that's going to give you your best chance of winning a championship and kind of making your career maybe look a little bit better versus being on a smaller or unfunded team?
Yeah, it's better for him to go ahead and make that jump. Jeff Burton is a prime example of that. He jumped up to run, I forget the name of the team, but they're a way lower team down on the totem pole, when everybody said, well, why would he get in that car? They don't have a chance to win, and it's just going to hurt his reputation. Well, it's not going to hurt his reputation because he's in the garage with the Cup cars every week. Cup drivers get to know him. They get to know what kind of person he is and what kind of racer he is. And when they talk about him amongst themselves or with their sponsor or whatever, they're not talking bad about him if he's not doing anything, driving over his head or anything. And that gets his name out there from the Cup garage to sponsors and everything, and that's definitely a plus as opposed to driving Xfinity cars or driving the trucks, because the majority of the drivers in the Cup garage aren't paying any attention to the lower classes. They got enough going on with their deal. So it's good for Jeffrey too, because he's going to be in the garage every week, and the drivers are going to get to know him and know his style and everything. And if he does good, he'll earn their respect and everything. And that's what you need. That's what you need, is the respect of your competitors in Cup. to help you advance to get a better ride or whatever.
Now, I was wondering this, and I wondered for the last week, and I've really not done any research, and I'm hoping maybe you know the answer to this, but with Junior owning Junior Motorsports and Jeffrey trying to make his way up through the ranks, is there a particular reason why Jeffrey is not driving for Junior Motorsports? Is it a conflict of interest? They've already tried this whole family thing in the day, and it kind of blew up. Or is there a deeper reason? Do you have any insight on why the family is not helping the family get this opportunity?
Yeah, the family deal didn't work before with Junior and Tony Uri. I mean, they're like first cousins, but they didn't accomplish much when Tony was the crew chief and Junior was the driver. That family thing just doesn't help. It's like the Labonte brothers, you know, they never raced on the same team, and Kyle and Kurt Busch, they're not interested in racing on the same team. You have to treat every driver, you know, not his family, as just a competitor. So I don't think that'll ever happen, really. I don't see the two Earnhardts joining forces. I just don't think that's going to happen because it just doesn't work.
I just wonder, I figured if I had family, they would at least give me some kind of limited, as long as I was talented, some kind of at least limited opportunity in their racing team to help. But, like I said, the whole Earnhardt's family, dating back to him being a DEI, just everything that's been one ugly situation. So I didn't know if that was kind of the reason behind it. And speaking of names in NASCAR, Nemechek's son was able to get his first victory this weekend. How big was that for Nemechek and the family to and being the fourth youngest series winner to get a victory and really kind of continue to jumpstart his career?
Well, other drivers have watched John Hunter this past season, and they've realized, he's got some talent. He can drive, and it might have surprised them that he won that race. But then again, I don't think it surprised them much because they had seen what he could do, and he won it on fuel mileage, which some people kind of look down on that and say, well, that's not really a win or anything. But yes, it is. You've got to have the crew chief to make that call to go for fuel mileage, and you've got to have a driver that's good enough that he can save fuel to get to the end.
Yes.
The combination of the two of them just, their strategy at the end worked where it didn't work for some of the others.
I definitely agree. I don't... even a range-shortened race, as bad as this sounds, I'm not going to say it's bad, but as frustrating as it is at times, if you win a range-shortened race, to me, it's just as much as a win as any other race because you strategize. You strategically pit-stopped yourself, put yourself in the position that when that rain fell, not knowing exactly when it was going to fall, whether or not you was going to run out of gas, whether or not your tires was going to hold up, whether or not when you went in the pits, that was when the rainfall was going to fall. There's a lot of things that it takes into strategically winning a race, regardless if it's a full 500-mile race or if it's a range-shortened race. You have to put yourself in that position. And for people to think that a win is distorted by it ending early or gas, on gas mileage, to me, that's just a lack of knowledge of how much strategy and how much goes into each particular race, the setup, and how you conduct yourself out there on the track. Like I said, there's many factors that play into it, regardless how you win the race. And so I don't like it when people discredit a victory regardless how you get it. I was at the Coke Zero 400 last year when Eric Almirola won the race, and As aggravating as it was, knowing that there was other drivers that probably had better cars, Danica was in the top 5 for most of that race, and honestly, she was one of the stronger cars out there, especially after that big one. I think it got down to she was probably going to be one of the strongest one, if not. And as aggravating as it was, he got through that big one. He strategically put himself in a position that when that rain fell, that was it, and he won the race. And I don't look at Eric Almirola or the Richard Petty Motorsports team any less for that victory, because they put themselves in that position to be there when it mattered, regardless if it was at the 50% mark or if it was at the 100% mark, they were there. So, that's just how I look at it.
Yeah, the bottom line is, if you go to Wikipedia and look up Eric Almirola, it just says he won a race.
Yep.
It doesn't say how he won it, just that he's a winner. And you get into strategy for rain coming and everything. You've got the crew chief's got an engineer sitting beside him on the box. Both of them have computers, and that engineer is tuned into weather reports to see how far away that storm cell is and estimate when it's going to get there to them. And he passes that on to the crew chief, and the crew chief figures that into his strategy. If they have a caution flag and it's a decision whether to pit or not to pit, and the crew chief, knowing that the rain is like 3 minutes away, he can get away with not pitting for tires and everything and hope that rain gets there at the right time, right before or right at the restart. And, they figure that out. They figure everything out now.
Mm-hmm.
They've got computers with simulated programs that can figure it out during the race. It used to be, back in the day, you had to figure all this out on your mind and in a piece of paper. And now they've got computers doing it for them. There's no fault in winning a race on fuel mileage or on a rain out or anything like that. A lot of times it just said you had better strategy than the rest of them did.
Oh, yes. Looking at the chase, we got, not surprisingly, we got all 4 Joe Gibbs cars filling the top 4 spots. I don't think that anybody would have thought otherwise. Yes, we don't think all 4 of them are going to be at Homestead in contention. It's a good possibility, but I don't think anybody's projecting that. But after week 1, especially after the last 8 to 10 races, really not a surprise that they won the first race or the fact that they hold the top 4 spots. Kurt Busch and Joey Logano got 5th, Jimmy Johnson 7th, Ryan Newman 8th, Keselowski and Earnhardt Jr. wrap out the top 10. I'm more focused on the latter part. You got Martin Truex, Jeff Gordon sitting 11th and 12th. I don't know yet if that is necessarily a win situation, 17 to 21 points back. I think that those 2 cars run consistently enough up front, top 5-ish, that maybe, with a little bad luck of other drivers, they can race their way in and stay in the top 12 to move into the next round. Jeff Gordon holding that 12th spot. But more specifically, the last 4, Jamie McMurray, Paul Menard, Clint Bowyer, and Kevin Harvick. Kevin Harvick would have finished better. Yes, I feel that he could have raced his way in. But where he's at now, I honestly believe it is you have to win to get in. That leaves me Jamie Mack, Paul Menard, and Clint Bowyer. Drivers to me that have been consistent, but consistently 10 to 20th, early to mid-teens, more specifically probably top 10, 15 drivers. Those 3 drivers, do you think that there's any way at this point, being 24 to 27 points behind the top spot, you're looking only 3 points out of 12th right now? And I know this is one race, but there's only a 3-race sprint to the next round. Do you think that any one of these 3 drivers can consistently drive their way back into the top 12 and get into the next round? Or do these 3 drivers really need to start gearing themselves and kind of going all in on trying to win a race, if it be strategy, if it be late late race decisions or how they conduct themselves, or are they still in a position where maybe they can conservatively, game plan and still race their way in point wise?
Other than Kevin Harvick, I don't see the other three making up any ground and getting into the chase after this round, because they're not known, and their performance this season had pointed to them being a winner.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it kind of points to them being on the second level, from 10th on back to 20th, and that's where they've been running. I don't see Clint Bowyer moving up. I think he's got too much on his mind with the Michael Waltrip deal folding and everything, so I don't see him moving up. And, it's just Kevin Harvick might move up solely on the base of winning one of the next two races, but I don't think the other three have much of a chance to, and they haven't really shown that this year. Jamie McMurray's shown flashes of good racing and everything, but not the consistency you need. So I would go ahead and count out the bottom four. Maybe not Kevin Harvick, but I don't know if Kevin will win a race or not.
I don't know. Last year he had to win two to make it happen. In both races he did it. Phoenix and then of course at Homestead. And ultimately he was crowned champion. So we'll see. We'll see how many minds he gets into over the next two races. And if you don't make it, then I hate to say this, but Jimmie Johnson, you better watch your back, because if he pins it on you for the reason he didn't make it to the next round and be able to defend his crown, I don't think you're going to see the next round either, or the following round anyway. So he definitely got to keep an eye on his back.
If Kevin's going down, he's going to take it with him.
I think he's going to take a few people with him. I think he's got a few targets that he would like to repay if it all said and done, and he's not going to be a contender. I'm sure that there's been stuff early in the year that he's still not let go. He's just waiting for the right time. And so while he's still in contention, he's going to play nice. But if he no longer becomes a contention, I have a feeling that the gloves are going to come off, and you're really going to see a bully out there. So definitely will make the chase interesting either way. Definitely want to thank you, Steve, for coming on and joining us. Hopefully we get you back next week. Don't forget Thursday nights, for those that are listening to us tonight, Racing is Rubbing. We got Racing with Big Sweat. Steve Billmeyer, Mr. Big Sweat himself, is the host out there. Myself and Chris Yellow Flag Caution joins a whole group of guests that Steve has joined us. I'm definitely looking forward. Do we have anything in lock for this Thursday night yet?
Yeah, I'm trying to get a third, but right now I've got two asphalt late model drivers, and they happen to be from North Carolina. I didn't plan that, but Harley Holden is one of them. He's been very successful this year, and, like I said, he races an asphalt late model. And Travis Bird is another asphalt race driver that's been rather consistent and good this year, and like I said, I'm looking for a third, but I've at least got those two, so we'll see how the week shapes up.
Also, make sure you guys tune in Thursday night, but also if you guys got to have some NASCAR talk and racing talk, period, in between shows and in between Sunday afternoons, and when the Sprint Cup guys get out there, make sure you guys check out Steve's group. Steve, go ahead and plug in your group right there. That is going about 6,300 strong at this point.
Yeah, I have a Facebook group called NASCAR and Other Racing, and it's not totally about NASCAR. It covers all types of racing. If you go to the page today, there's posts about the Formula One race this past weekend, and especially the guy walking down the track during the race. There's posts on there about drag racing, about John Force running the Jeff Gordon tribute car. We talk a lot about sprint car racing, dirt modified, asphalt late models, asphalt modified. we cover a lot of different racing. So whatever you're into, you can come to that group and you'll find something about it. You'll find members that you can chat with that feel the same way you do. It's like the old saying is, you can't swing a dead cat by the tail and not hit a modified fan in the Northeast. Modified racing is a lot bigger than NASCAR racing up there. And if that's what you're into, we got other people that are into it. So come join us. We do race threads on any race that's televised. We get a bunch of the group members together and we talk about the racing, talk about what's going on, our favorite driver, and being polite and not so favorite drivers. For the Chicago race, we had over 600 comments during the race. So we stay pretty busy. Come join us and check it out, see what the buzz is all about.
Well, as always, Steve, it was an honor and a privilege. Love having you on. Can't wait till Thursday night when we do Racing with Big Sweat. Everybody, make sure you guys check out our site over at www.the110nation.com. With our race schedule, catch all the shows, catch all the announcements going on with the 110 Nation. You guys have a great night, and for those that want to hear some local race car talk, tune in Thursday night. If not, catch me and Steve back here next Monday night for some more Racing is Rubbing. You guys have a great night.
Good night.